Welcome to this week in the world of wrestling.
Welcome to TWitWoW, the best wrestling podcast made for wrestling fans, by wrestling fans, on the web today. I'm John, that's my cohort in commentary, Ashton, and this is our Monday Night Raw review. And I gotta say, for me personally, this is a pretty average episode of Raw. I don't want to make it out to seem like it was horrendous. It seemed like a more story-driven episode of Raw, which I think when you're this close to Fastlane, is certainly a positive. But I just felt like in terms of in-ring and the overall atmosphere, the show was kind of lacking for me. It's like I told Ashton when we were watching, if I was to grade it on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd probably give this Raw about a 6. Pretty middle-of-the-road show, as I like to say. What'd you think of it, Ashton?
I personally find it kind of funny that you, and I don't necessarily disagree with you here, but you say it's a storyline-driven Raw, and we had so few actual segments dedicated to storylines. We just had so many matches that progressed storylines in and of themselves, and to be perfectly honest, I wouldn't say this Raw was bad. I would just say it was boring. Like TNA Impact levels of I don't give a crap about anything that's happening right now.
Yeah, there were some things that I thought were really cool about this show, and there are definitely certain characters that I am heavily invested in right now, obviously. But, this just wasn't really that spectacular of a Raw at all. And it's always funny because with every Raw that comes around, I'm always excited about the possibility of what might occur, and yet the reality just never really measures up. At least that's been the case for quite some time now, and this Raw will just be recorded under the same banner. This is just pretty lackluster as far as I'm concerned.
Would you like to know what match got the biggest reaction out of me?
What's that?
It was the Usos, or not the Usos, I'm sorry, Gold Star versus the New Day. And the reaction was a loud, obnoxious, oh, when the New Day's music hit. That was the loudest reaction I had tonight. The biggest positive reaction I had, believe it or not, was probably to the Divas match because Paige won.
Yeah, and my biggest positive reaction was probably saying, even though it doesn't make any sense to me why you do this match now and not just save it for Fastlane for the titles, Usos versus Team Uppercats. So, that was pretty good. And, again, pretty average episode of Raw.
And here's the crazy thing, though. People always say, "Oh, we want more wrestling. It's a wrestling show. Give us more wrestling." Typically, a typical episode of Raw has anywhere between 45 minutes and an hour and 15 minutes of wrestling on the show.
Right.
If I had to guess, I would say that this show had significantly more in-ring time than usual, and it was the most boring show in a long time.
Yeah, and you're right.
I think the real problem to me, actually, you know what? Let's just get into our first segment, and then I'll complain.
Yeah, perfect. Our first segment, Heat of the Night, and we'll pick up right where we left off. Do you have any Heats of the Night tonight?
I don't have any true... Actually, no. You know what? I do have a Heat of the Night, but I also have a nitpick that I would rather get out of the way first.
Let's do it.
The nitpick is that not a single match tonight mattered.
Yeah,
there were no consequences. Every match, and one of the biggest reasons, in my opinion, to watch a wrestling match is the why. Why is this match happening? If one of these guys wins, what does he get? If the other guy wins, what does he get out of it? And in this case, none of these matches had any consequences. None of these matches had any real build up to them to get you invested into them. None of these matches mattered. It was just matches for the sake of having matches. And to me, the worst part is that none of them were exceptionally entertaining. We had one match that went for a little bit longer that I'm sure internet marks are creaming over, but I really didn't get that into. Ziggler Wyatt. But everything else was pointless and boring. And why? I just don't understand how it's gotten this bad with this much talent.
Yeah, that's always been the dichotomy with WWE, I think especially in recent times, is that you have such a stacked roster, but it's not translating into a compelling product like, say, the Ruthless Aggression era, or hell, maybe even more recently than that, but that's just the first thing that comes to my mind. It's just amazing because they have all the pieces, right? But they just can't get them, at least in my opinion, to really, go together in such a way that I'm like, man, I cannot wait for Raw next week. Because I really haven't felt that way, I'd say, in quite some time. It's crazy. But, yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying. Like, even Ziggler Wyatt, which I loved their match last week, and I thought it was significantly better than the one here.
Well,
but
and that's the other problem, though, John. The other problem is that we've seen all of these matches before. How many times do we need to watch Ryback versus Seth Rollins? How many times do we need to see Gold Star versus The New Day? How many times do we need to see Wyatt Ziggler? I understand that you don't have hundreds of superstars that are over at your disposal to use. Whatever happened to a good old-fashioned squash match? Why can't we have Bray Wyatt versus, I don't know, maybe Zack Ryder? And then how about Dolph Ziggler versus somebody who is actually relevant? Or maybe even I'm putting myself on the spot, and I shouldn't be doing that because now I can't think of it.
Well, actually, not to cut you off, Ashton, but to kind of take the ball from you here for a second. I mean, and just to kind of supplement your point, not to jump the gun here, but remember my reaction at the beginning of the show when we found out we were going to get Roman Reigns and Daniel Bryan versus Kane and Big Show. And what was my reaction to that? I said, of course it's a tag team match. Of course it is.
Right, and another thing that I do want to bring up, why do we all of a sudden have a little mini feud going on between Curtis Axel and Dean Ambrose? There we go. There's your perfect one. How about that? Let's do, instead of Ziggler versus Wyatt again, let's do Wyatt versus a jobber. My specific case, I said Zack Ryder. Doesn't have to be him. And how about if we do Dolph Ziggler versus Curtis Axel? There's a match that we haven't seen in a while, a really long while, if not ever. And then we can have Dean Ambrose just cut a promo. He doesn't need to be in a match. He can just come out, cut a promo. Maybe he cuts a promo from the back. I don't know. I mean, hell, when was the last time we saw Bad News Barrett in a match? How about if we do Ziggler versus BNB, and then Ambrose gets on the Titantron this time instead of BNB? Just change things up. It's so monotonous every single week, the same crap.
Well, yeah, I think that's what's really grating, and it leaves me so unenthused because it is the same repetitive kind of structure. And yeah, I totally get what you're saying. Even a small change up, like you said, Bray Wyatt versus Zack Ryder, and seeing him crush Ryder, and maybe doing his promo to the Undertaker in ring. And so I'm loving what Wyatt's doing with the Undertaker right now, but maybe like something live.
Was one of the most compelling things that happened all night. And you know very well that I have fallen, I suppose you could say, out of love with Bray Wyatt's promo skills. I don't think that he's as amazing as people make him out to be, but the work that he's been doing talking to The Undertaker has been great.
Yeah, absolutely. And, but you know what? I don't want to commit the same atrocities that this Raw is committing, being repetitive. So I will end my point there. What was your actual heat of the night? Because you said you had
Do
one
you
nitpick.
not have any heat of the night or nitpick?
I have one nitpick.
Well, then you go next, and I'll do my heat of the night. We're back and forth here.
I'm not digging BNZ at all. And I
Okay,
just kind of
yeah.
put that out there.
My mom actually brought something up about that too, and all I could say was it's typical WWE. They take something cool and ruin it.
Yeah, people on Tweet Talk were commenting about it, that, even his opening line, like, I'm afraid I've got some bad news. Sorry for the horrible accent there. But, it's so simple and direct, and it works. And now I think they're trying to overly complicate something that should be incredibly straightforward. And for me personally, I'm not trying to crap all over it, because I think you know how much I love Wade Barrett. But it's just not connecting with me right now. Maybe it will.
You know what's really funny, John?
What's that?
Everything that you're saying right now actually plays right into the hand of my heat of the night.
Excellent. Let's have at it then.
Well, I feel like you weren't done with your point about BNZ.
It's just BNZ is not connecting with me at all. And I think, God, this is going to be so hyperbolic by me, but I think this does kind of contribute once again to not necessarily tragedy of Wade Barrett, but it's like every time I feel like this guy's going to get it together, it's either an injury or a repackaging or something. This guy just cannot ride that train all the way from point A to point B. It is really sad.
Yeah. All right. My heat of the night is something that I suppose happens more frequently than we would like to admit. But I hadn't really noticed it to the degree that I noticed it tonight until tonight.
Okay.
The WWE needs so badly to stop trying so desperately to cling to any semblance of cultural relevance that they hope to get their grips on.
Yes.
The constant references to the Grammys tonight were intolerable.
Yeah, I completely agree. Even the
Do you want to know who cares about the Grammys?
music fans.
Not wrestling fans, that's for freaking sure.
Yeah, not wrestling fans. You know, it's a completely distinct product.
Do you know what wrestling fans care about?
Wrestling storylines.
Imagine that. Do you want to know how many people are going to tune into Raw because they're talking about the Grammys?
Wait, I'm getting good at this game. 0.
0 is correct.
Yes, I'm on such a hot streak right now.
Do you want to know how many people are going to tune into Raw because they have a character who's a parody of TMZ?
0.
Correct.
Yeah, man. I mean, even...
Here's another little game for you, John. Do you know how many major news sites are going to cover the WWE making Grammy references?
I'd guess 0.
Do you want to know how many major news sites are going to have a big compelling story up on their website about how the WWE has a parody of TMZ?
0. Except maybe TMZ, so maybe 1?
No, TMZ doesn't give a crap. TMZ sees the WWE the same way that the WWE saw WCW in the 90s. They don't want to mention them. They don't want to acknowledge that they exist. They are above them.
Oh, wow. Yeah, then 0. And, you know, it's like to, again, supplement your point, and I hate to say this because, you know, I love this guy, and it wasn't that he wasn't on point tonight, but Paul Heyman mentioning Brian Williams again after he did a small thing on the network. Like, why?
Yeah, the Brian Williams reference, too. Yeah, of course. Absolutely.
It just makes no sense, and to me, it kind of just throws everything off kilter that you're trying to build. It's the same thing when what was it, like last year, 2 years ago, when Swagger was getting his major push, and they wanted to do Glenn Beck. Now, granted, Glenn Beck was a bit more different because he.
See, you know what though, John? Do you want to know why that was different?
Because Glenn Beck directly criticized WWE, so
because between Glenn Beck going out of his way to put the WWE's name in his mouth, but also because the storyline worked in that situation. Jack Swagger and Zeb Coulter were right-wing extremists preaching about certain things that Glenn Beck, who also happens to be a right-wing extremist, but at the same time happened to disagree with. So because of that, it made everything tie back to the storyline, because it actually worked for Swagger and Zeb's gimmick. Mentioning the Grammys as a part of a promo 5 or 6 times over the course of 1 3-hour show doesn't relate in any way, shape, or form back to your actual show. It's just like, it's worse than a cheap pop, because at least a cheap pop will get a crowd reaction.
Yeah, it'll get a crowd reaction, and normally with cheap pops, they're relevant in some kind of context. Again, you cannot get any more of a disparity between the Grammys and a WWE product. It's irreconcilable. And, you know, it just goes right back to your heat of the night. The idea that they want to cling on to anything that's relevant in popular culture and tie it back to them when the focus should be on their own product, because with the roster they have, which ties back to our further point, they're capable of making a product that can stand on its own merits without help from anything else.
The WWE, you know, it's hilarious, and people say this all the time on Reddit, and it has never been more relevant than it is now. The WWE puts out all of this material on the network, whether it's the Monday Night War or the Rise and Fall of WCW. They put out, or the top 10 stuff that they do. They put out all of this material making fun of WCW and calling things out that WCW did wrong. And then the WWE proceeds to do the exact same crap 15, 20 years later.
Yeah, that is the funny part to me. They spend all this time, poking and prodding WCW any chance that they get. And all I want to do is go, are you looking in your own mirror right now?
Yeah.
Are
Yep.
you looking down your own road? Because, WCW...
They make fun of WCW for letting all of the old guys win all the championships and all that stuff. Well, it seems to me your current champion was more relevant about 15 years ago, and the two guys who are basically the top heels in your company right now are 40-plus years old.
Yeah, and it's not even just that. It's just this preoccupation with the past. WCW to me, I mean, and this isn't even a knock at WCW, but that's over. That's been over forever now. Look to the future. We're, thinking about Fastlane and WrestleMania. That's where I want my interest to come from. I don't care who you're kicking when they're already not only down, but dead and buried. I want you to actually build something here. I just feel so disengaged. And admittedly, I'll probably come back on here next Raw or somewhere close to Mania and say that I feel more engaged now. But that's the
thing. Like, we're not trying to say that the WWE sucks and that we're not watching next week. We're just trying to say that this specific show highlighted some really negative points that the WWE needs to work on.
Absolutely. And I hope they do, because, as you and I have stressed, I think in this same segment, they're capable. They are completely capable with the roster they have. It's just not clicking. So, with that said...
I think that's the thing that pisses me off the most.
Right.
Is that, basically, the WWE they blame the bad ratings on the workers rather than the writers.
Right.
When, everybody in their right mind knows that the workers are talented, they just aren't booked in a way to make people care.
Exactly. I'm a huge Seth Rollins fan, Cesaro fan, Bray Wyatt fan, but I wouldn't care about them if they were doing storylines, that just seem to be nonsensical and not get them anywhere.
You're kind of going against the grain on that one with Cesaro.
Well, he is with Tyson Kidd, and they're a cool tag team in the tag team division. I'll take that over, him yodeling or, saying that it's going to be his year this year and then jobbing out to people. Like, at least he's on an uptick in a tag team that I can care about, because Tyson Kidd is also awesome. I'm just saying, give me something.
Right.
That's all I'm asking for here.
Yep. All right. Let's move on, because it's one of those things where I could go on for, I don't want to say hours, but I could go on for a really long time talking about WWE trying so hard to do things that WCW did that they make fun of WCW for doing. So let's just cut our losses, move on. Let's talk about the show itself.